Hello everybody, this is Mr. Rob and welcome back to episode number 21 of the Washington Commanders franchise here on Madden NFL 24, and today we're going to recap year number 1 because we have reached the postseason and the Washington Commanders will not be a part of it after finishes in the season 6-11, but we can still look back at what was a successful season in some parts, what was a disappointment in others, as well as we're going to simulate the postseason today and see who makes it to the Super Bowl, as well as check on some of the league leaders, some of the stats of the season, and see what coaching changes will be going on in this episode. That all happen at the end. But hope you guys are excited for this one. If you are, make sure you drop a like and you subscribe down below, especially if you want more franchise content. Now, obviously, with year 1 being done, the next thing on the horizon is the off-season. I kind of wanted to give you just like a layout as to what's going to happen with this series in the next couple weeks, because it's actually going to move a little slower in the coming time. Now, part of the reason is that's because I want to live stream the off-season, and I want to live stream the draft. I do like to do those. I think live streaming the off-season of this series would be awesome for the channel. It would be awesome for you guys to be able to interact as well. The only thing is I can really only live stream on Saturdays just because I am so busy during the week, and that's okay. But that means this Saturday I was going to do the Super Bowl live stream just because I won't be done with all the off-season stuff. I won't be ready for it this weekend. So I think this Saturday we're going to live stream the Super Bowl, see who makes it in today's episode, and then watch it together. Now that would mean next Saturday would be the off-season, but I actually have a wedding to go to next Saturday, so we'll not be able to do the offseason next weekend. So the free agency will be in 2 weeks, or 3 weeks, excuse me, on November 4th, while the draft is tentative for the next weekend, November 11th. So yes, it's going to take us a little bit to get to the offseason, but I want to be able to stream it with you guys. I want to be able to go through it with you, and I think that'll just be the most fun. But that's kind of what the schedule looks like. Now, speaking of the schedule, let's take a look at our Commander schedule because we did finish 6-11 on the season, and it was some up and downs as we go through the regular season. We dropped the first game to the Cardinals, then we bounced back and won against the Broncos, and then it was kind of an alternate between losing streaks, and then we win a game. We lost to the Bills 58-10. I know early on in the season I was still trying to get my sliders adjusted. I'm still honestly trying to get that happy medium because I do like to play 15-minute quarters, but it just seems to get really high stats in this game, and you'll see that when we go to team stats at the end. But regardless, I think I am going to play at 11-minute quarters. Let me know in the comments section below, do you like 11-minute quarters or do you want to see 15? But we lost to the Bills 58-10. And then we barely lost to the Eagles 30-28, what was a tough one. But then on Thursday Night Football, we beat the Bears, and then we lost the next 2 games, lost a close one to the Falcons, and they got blown out by Big Blue in New York, 59-20. Then we bounced back and beat the Eagles, a very good game. Jacoby Brissett played really well, 31-23. We lost to the Patriots, and what was a dud after that. Then we beat the Seahawks in a high-scoring affair down the stretch. And then we lost the next 2 games against the Giants and got destroyed on Thanksgiving by the Cowboys. And then we beat the Dolphins 30-23. But then coming out of the bye week, we lost the next 3 games. Lost to the Rams by 3. Lost to the Jets by 17. And then Sam Howell started the final 2 games of the season. But we lost to the Commanders by 7. And then we actually beat the Cowboys in the last game of the season. And because of that, and what was an absolute classic, by the way, the Cowboys do not have the 1 seed in the NFL playoffs for the NFC. So that was kind of an awesome moment, and we didn't even change our draft stock. We were going to have the same position regardless. Speaking of draft stock, here's a look at what the top of the draft looks like. The Bears will have the number 1 pick again, and we will have the 6th pick. And it doesn't matter because we beat the Broncos this year, so even if we would have lost, we would have had the 6th pick regardless. So it's a pretty decent pick. It'll be interesting to see what we do with that pick. There's more about that in a little bit. But in terms of the best team in the league, it was the Vikings. They went 13-4. The best team in the AFC was the Bengals. We'll take a look at the division standings real quick. In the AFC North, the Bengals won it 12-5. The Ravens were there all the way, though. They finished 11-6, followed by the Browns and the Steelers. Then in the South, it was the Colts who stormed with 8 straight victories to end the season. Yes, they were 3-6 at one point. They won 8 straight. They're one of the hottest teams going into the postseason, and then we had the division. The Jaguars do not, despite the fact they also won their final 3 games. They were unable to clinch a playoff berth in a very competitive AFC. The Texans finished 9-8, and then the Titans were 8-9. In the AFC East, it was the Bills who got it done, 11-6, followed by the Dolphins, who got a playoff spot at 10-7, as well as the Jets, who won their final 3 games and got into the playoffs. If we would have beat the Jets a few weeks ago, they would have been knocked out. And the Patriots, they were pretty bad. They were kind of disastrous this year. They finished 4-13, even though they did beat us. In the West, it was the Chiefs who win 10-7 to win that division. It was not easy for Kansas City, but they are in the postseason once more. The Raiders were 9-8. If you remember the Raiders, they were the final unbeaten team in the league. I'm pretty sure they were 8-0, and they finished 9-8. So it was a terrible second half of the season for the Las Vegas Raiders. The Chargers went 8-9, and the Broncos 5-12. In the NFC, the North, the best team in football was the Vikings. Nobody else finished above 500. 7-10 for the Lions, 6-11 for the Packers, 3-14 for the Bears. In the South, the Falcons won this division. It was a dogfight for most of the year. They went 11-6. Followed the Saints, who also squeaked into the postseason at a 9-8 record. The Buccaneers went 7-10, and so did the Carolina Panthers, who, remember, his first pick goes to the Chicago Bears. In our division, the East, the Cowboys ended up winning the division, but they tied with the Eagles, but they won the tiebreaker. The Eagles also went 12-5, and then the Giants 10-7. We had a very tough division, so I think going 6-11 is not entirely too bad. We did win 2 division games against the Eagles and the Cowboys, and we end up with a 6th pick. In the West, the 49ers 12-5 won that division. It was pretty much a cakewalk for them. The Seahawks were 7-10, the Rams were 6-11, and then the Cardinals were 4-13. So that's a look at how the standings shaked up. And let's take a look, before we get into stats, let's take a look at the staff moves, because it's pretty interesting. There's, Black Monday in the NFL, and I don't think it left some surprises. So we'll start with just the head coaches. We won't go into offensive, defensive coordinators today. But here's a list of the guys who are not going to be returning to their jobs next year. And one guy not on this list is the Patriots. Bill Belichick retired shortly before the season began. They went with the interim head coach Joe Judge this year. He will not return, so the Patriots job is also open. But first off, the Browns, they fired Kevin Stefanski. He is no longer going to be the head coach of the Cleveland Browns. Although he had a pretty good stint in Cleveland, but it comes to an end. Another shocker, the Panthers, they fired Frank Reich after 1 season. He honestly didn't even do that bad in Carolina, I would say, for year number 1. But he's gone after 1 year. Pete Carroll, the Seahawks, he was not fired. He was the only one to retire, so Seattle's now looking for a head coach. They're probably just going to hire in-house, though. The big name, though, Mike Tomlin has been fired from the Pittsburgh Steelers. They had the worst record in the AFC, and Mike Tomlin is gone. Pittsburgh, for the first time in quite some time, for the first time, they're going to have a new head coach. I assume Tomlin will get hired somewhere else. Let's see where he goes. And then we fire Ron Rivera. Yes, Ron Rivera has been fired. He went 6-11. It's been a bad couple of seasons for him in Washington. So we are looking for a new coach. And we'll find out at the end of this episode who is the new head coach for the Washington Commanders. So we'll take a look. That's just very interesting to see. Now we'll take a look at player stats. We'll go through our stats first and see where our players stacked up. Starting with the passing game, Jacoby Brissett was the starter for 15 games, and he went 62% completion, 3,500 yards, 15 touchdowns, 18 interceptions. Part of the reason why Ron Rivera got fired is because he just rolled with Jacoby Brissett too long. I think they should have turned over the reins a little bit earlier. And, well, Jacoby Brissett, he was good, but he was also not very good. Sam Howell started the final 2 games, and I honestly thought Sam Howell played pretty well. He has 65% completion, 750 yards, 6 touchdowns to 4 interceptions. But in those 2 games he started, he went 4 touchdowns to 1 interception. So he had a very good stretch towards the end. And did he play himself into starting contention next year? We'll have to wait and see, because we do have the 6th pick. It is a very loaded quarterback class with Caleb Williams and Shedeur Sanders and Drake May and Quinn Ewers and company and Michael Penix Jr. So will the Washington Commanders fall in love with one of those quarterbacks, or will they give Sam Howell a full year to start? It's going to be a very interesting storyline going into the offseason, and we'll just have to see what happens. On the rushing end, we had a guy who really exploded this season, Antonio Gibson, 1,500 yards, 8 touchdowns on the ground. He exploded into superstar development, had an insane season. If there's one knock against Gibson, is he got hurt in a lot of games. He played all 17, but there was plenty of games where he did not finish. I think maybe the Commanders need to do a better job of getting Brian Robinson Jr. more in the mix. He started the season as a starting back, but kind of just fell into the backseat role once Gibson just played like an animal. He did have 6 touchdowns, though, and 383 yards, but I'd like to see maybe Robinson Jr. get a little bit more. involved every game just so it can relieve some of the workload from Gibson. Or maybe, who knows, maybe Robinson Jr. becomes a trade asset. Brissett did also add 6 touchdowns on the ground, which is very good, so he was effective in the dual threat row. And then Patterson got some touches, and Sam Howell scrambled 5 times as well. In the receiving game, Terry McLaurin was by far and away our best receiver. He led in receptions, he led in yards, he led in touchdowns. A one-man freak at 1,400 yards, 93 receptions, and 9 touchdowns. He was an absolute animal. I'd like to see the Commanders be less one-dimensional in the passing game next season, but at least we do have that bona fide number 1 in Scary Terry. Antonio Gibson caught 91 passes as well for 568 yards out of the backfield. Not a great average, so to speak, but he did have 2 touchdowns in the air. It's just good to get your running backs also involved in that pass game. Just respect that ability. Curtis Samuel, 48 catches, 567 yards, and 2 touchdowns. He is a free agent after this year, and one stat they don't track that I thought Curtis Samuel was very bad at was drops. Samuel had a lot of drops, especially in key situations, and he got hurt. He missed 4 games of the season, so I don't know if Curtis Samuel returns to this team in the offseason. Our tight end, Logan Thomas, 49 catches, 555 yards, 1 touchdown. I would have liked to seen a little bit more out of our tight end play, and that's maybe something we want to take a look at in the offseason. I do think having that tight end who can catch it over the middle of the field and kind of just open up that area is very vital, especially when you play teams like the Cowboys twice a year who have an amazing quarterback tandem and Stephon Gilmore and Trayvon Diggs. You want somebody who can attack those linebackers, so I think maybe the tight end play could be a spot we upgrade in the offseason. Jahan Dobson up next, 57 catches, 529 yards, 2 touchdowns. He's also a guy I thought had a bad case of the drops. Did not have a good sophomore campaign, in my opinion. I'd like to see him step up in his junior year. De'Ami Brown, 17 catches, 885 yards, and a touchdown. I thought he did very good when players like Dotson and Samuel were hurt. He also, though, did miss 4 games with his own injury, but I did like what I saw of De'Ami Brown. John Bates was the backup tight end for a little bit. He had 19 catches and 1 score. Not really else much to say there. Dax Milne, 9 catches, 116 yards. He's another player that stepped up when injuries happened to Brown and Samuel, and I thought he played really well in the snaps that he did get. I wish he would have got actually more snaps than just 228. He made some diving grabs, some good contested catches. I'd like to see what Dax Milne can do in the preseason next year, and maybe he plays himself into a deeper roster spot. Cole Turner had 2 touchdowns as well. He's a nice solid backup tight end. Maybe he does take over that backup job full time. And then Robinson Jr. also had a score. For blocking, I mean, we take a look at our worst blocker with Sam Cosmi. He was the starting right tackle. Overall, I thought the blocking did okay. I thought in the run game they were great, and I thought in the passing game they were suspectable, or they were decent, I would say. And that's something I want to kind of focus on going into this all season. Is I do believe if this Washington team does want to get back to the prominence that they were at one point, I think we do need to tap into that historic offensive line that we've had in the past. I think, you know, when they were the Hogs back in the 80s, they were pretty dominant, and I think won 2 Super Bowls in that decade. And I think we need to return to those roots. I think we need to get a really strong offensive line. That way they can continue to run the ball well. And whoever plays quarterback next year, whether it's a veteran or it's a rookie draft pick or it's Sam Howell, it's good to give that protection, especially if it is a young guy in the back. So I do really think this offensive line could be the key to us next season. On defense, this is where the stats get a little skewed because of the high quarter amounts. We have a lot of players with high tackles. I mean, Yamin Davis had 185 tackles, which is absurd, and then Cody Barton had 169 as well, and they were the top 2 in the league. So this is where I think the 15-minute quarters does kind of skew stats a little bit, which I think next year if we play a full season with 11-minute quarters, this could be a little bit better. But still strong seasons regardless. I do believe Barton's, though, is not as good as you think. He was a really, really good run defender, but in the passing game, I thought Cody Barton was very, very much a liability. He was not very good in the passing game, and I think that's also a position we need to upgrade in this offseason. I think Yamin Davis is a great coverage linebacker. I mean, he's not great, but he's getting there. But I do think we need another player to play opposite him in those nickel packages, because Cody Barton was there for most of the season, and he honestly didn't do that good of a job. Our sack leader was Daron Payne with 8. We really didn't get that much sacks across the board, and that's because our defensive line was like so hurt this year. Rarely did we have all 4 of our starters at the same time, which is unfortunate because this is by far and away the strength of the D-line of this team is the D-line. You got Deron Payne, Jonathan Allen, Montez Sweat, Chase Young. Those are 4 stars at your defensive line. But when Deron Payne only plays 12 games, Montez Sweat only plays 15, Chase Young only plays 14, he got hurt in a lot of those games, Jonathan Allen only played 11. I mean, none of those 4 played all 17 games. And I really do think that hurt us a lot in the defensive side of the ball. We weren't able to get as much pressure. I mean, Casey Tuhill had a good season, but I mean, he shouldn't be the second highest sack guy on this team with 5.5. Sweat did have 5. Chase Young had 3. And if you remember in the last episode, he did sign a 3-year contract extension, so he is going to stay on this team. The Commanders finally did budge and give him that second contract, but it's not a 5-year deal. It's only 3 years. So Chase Young still a little bit the word is out, so to speak. And then Allen only had 2 sacks. Yes, he had 24 tackles for a loss, but I need to see a little bit more in that pass game, especially getting that disruption at the middle. That can be deadly. Speaking of interceptions, we had a bunch of players with 2. Cody Barton had 2. Kendall Fuller had 2. I thought Fuller had a great season at that cornerback spot. We didn't call his name a lot during the games, and when you're a corner, that's a good thing. That means they're not throwing all over you. And he did sign an extension. He will be on the team next year, and I'm looking forward to having Fuller again because he was by far and away our best secondary player. Curl was okay. He had 2 interceptions, but he did give up some of the big plays. I'd like to see a bounce-back season out of him. St. Juice was all right. He had 2 interceptions, but he also did allow a lot of passes out of the slot, so I'd like to see him do a little bit better. And Emmanuel Forbes, our first-round rookie last year out of Mississippi State. I thought he did pretty good. He did miss the final 2 games of the season with an injury, but I think for a rookie campaign, especially as a corner playing in a division like this, I think he did pretty good. So I think him and Fuller could be a solid 2-man tandem. And then another guy you don't see labeled up here, KJ Henry. Yes, remember he had the big interception. That was awesome in the Jets game to see. 32-yard return by the rookie out of Clemson. But one guy who didn't have a pick, who played, I thought, pretty decent in the secondary, was Deommodore Lenoir. Remember we traded him, well, we traded for him in the 49ers trade that sent Derek Forrest over there. I like to see what he can do next year on a full season in Washington. And then just another player to highlight, Jartavius Martin, who did take over that free safety spot. I thought he did pretty good. He was all right. I mean, he was good in run defense. Wasn't the best in the pass game, though. He did allow a couple of big shots behind him, got fooled on the play action. But I'd like to see what he can do in his sophomore campaign. In the kicking, Joey Slye went 40 for 44, which was 90%, and he did miss 2 extra points. Maybe, I think I would like to potentially move on from him in the offseason. And then our punter, Tressway, he was all right, but I do think we can get a better punter because when we go to put backspin on the ball, Tressway's backspin is absurd. His ball hits the ground, it bounces backwards like 20 yards. So it's a lot harder to pin people in with that. And I think maybe we have new specialists next season. We did have the 1 kick return from Antonio Gibson on the first game of the season, which was pretty awesome. And then nothing in the punting game. We'll take a look, though, at the rest of the league. Let's take a look at the league leaders going around. Starting in the passing game, the passing yards leader was Patrick Mahomes. He had 4,707 yards. Joe Burrow was right behind him with 44. And then Dak Prescott, Kirk Cousins, Aaron Rodgers in his first season in gangrene, Jonathan Allen, the usual names you would see. Desmond Ridder, he did pretty decent. And then Justin Herbert to round out the 4,000s. Your passing touchdowns was Joe Burrow with 43, and I think Burrow might make a very strong case for the MVP this season to only 5 interceptions. Mahomes is also up there. He could be going for his 3rd MVP award, 37-6, and Aaron Rodgers, of course, 35-7. Your interceptions leader was Russell Wilson. He joins the 20 for 20 club, 23 touchdowns, 23 interceptions. That has not been a good experience in Denver. Even with Sean Payton, it wasn't enough. Mac Jones had 20 interceptions. His ratio got a lot better. He was awful in the first half of the season. Wasn't even that good this year. He is very much entering a make it or break a year for New England in this season. He might not even get the chance. It depends what they do in the draft. Rezer had 19, and then Stafford, and then us, 18 for Jacoby Brissett. Bryce Young also had 18, and Kyler Murray. Your rushing leader was Saquon Barkley, who had about 1,700 yards, followed by Josh Jacobs and Antonio Gibson. The most carries also goes to Saquon. And then your rushing touchdowns was Isaiah Pacheco and Josh Jacobs with 18. That is a lot of touchdowns. Jonathan Taylor had 17, followed by Barkley. And then Jones, Dameon Pierce, and Breece Hall all had 15. Receiving wise, the receiving leader was Tyreek Hill, who had 1,449 yards and 16 touchdowns. Cheetah is just lightning on the field. It's absurd what he's able to do. Terry McLaurin was only behind him by 18, so he became an enclosed second and way less receptions. And then Stephon Diggs, Cooper Kupp, Justin Jefferson round out the 1,300 club, and the 1,200 club goes to CeeDee Lamb, Chris Olave, and Tyler Boyd. Travis Kelce was your leader in the tight ends, 99 catches, 1,200 yards, and 11 touchdowns. Your reception leader was Justin Jefferson with 129. And then touchdowns is Tyreek Hill and also Brandon Ayuk, who had 16 for San Francisco. Blocking, your worst lineman was Mekhi Becton, Colton Miller, and Spencer Brown. That's on the sacks allowed. I mean, Becton's still a good lineman, but definitely a little bit of a disappointing season for him. Your tackles leader, this is what I'm talking about. We have the top 2 tackles. If you ignore us, it's Deion Jones. Sacks was Micah Parsons with 14.5. Nobody really blew up the defensive side of the football this season in terms of the sack game. Miller's still kicking at 14, as well as Max Crosby. Interceptions, Bobby Wagner had 6, as well as big play Darius Slay with 6, and Fred Warner with 6. So a couple of linebackers up there. Jalen Petrie was the highest safety with 5, as well as Darnell Savage. Kicking, was anybody perfect on the season? The only one that was perfect with a lot of kicks was Graham Gano. He had perfect 17 for 17, go Thurs. And then there's a lot of guys who had perfect from extra points. Worst kicker, Mason Crosby. Yeah, he only went 2 for 5. And Jake Moody, 8 for 16. Yowsh. Punting, not really cared about. Kick returns, there were 2 in the NFL. There was us and there was Calvin Austin, 3rd of the Steelers. And then punts, there was 1. And if you remember, that was in our game. Joey Jackson returned a punt for a touchdown against us. So that takes a look at the league leaders. Team stats, we were 4th in offensive yards. We were dead last in defensive yards. And then we were 8th in points scored. And then for points allowed, we were also dead last. Just to kind of take a look at these quickly, the best offensive team in the NFL was the Bengals. Brian Callahan definitely cooking out there with Zach Taylor. The Chiefs, no surprise. The Falcons were 3rd. I think that's a little bit of a surprise. Then us, I don't think we deserved to be in the top 5, but again, we had skewed stats. Points per game, we'll take a look at points per game actually real quick. The highest scoring team was the Eagles. They scored 29.5 points per game. The lowest was the Patriots with only 15.6. On defense, we have the worst defense by a whole ton. Goodness. 1,700 almost was the difference. Yikes. By far and away the worst passing team. Not the worst run team. That was the Seahawks with 24 rushing yards allowed. Sacks was the Broncos with 43, followed by the Cowboys and the Bills. And then just kind of look at turnover differential, because that is something that I am kind of interested about. See how bad we were. We were actually not worse. We had -13, but the Broncos and the Rams both had -14, while the best goes to the Eagles with a +23. So that kind of takes a look at the majority of this episode. That kind of wraps up the live comm as well. Here's a look at the playoff bracket again. I did show this at the end of the last season. You can pause it here if you would like, but we're just going to go ahead and jump right into the playoff sim. Starting off with the first game, the 7-seed Jets beat the 2-seeded Colts. I know this might look like an upset, but in my opinion, this isn't an upset. I actually did think the Jets were going to win this game. The experience of Rodgers trumps the rookie Anthony Richardson, but a good season for the Colts nonetheless. The Bills do beat the Dolphins 31-15. Their defense shuts down Miami as they're able to move on in this one. Josh Allen played pretty well. It just wasn't enough firepower on Miami's side to get the job done. And then finally, the Chiefs do beat the Ravens. I thought this was going to be the best game of the weekend, and it might have been. The Chiefs get 7 points in the fourth quarter to win 24-17. Pat Mahomes again is able to knock off Lamar Jackson. In the NFC side of things, the 2-seeded Cowboys beat the 7-seeded Saints 28-13. I thought the NFC matchups would not be as good as the AFC, and I think I was right. The Cowboys just dominated the Saints, who just snuck into the playoffs, and it showed here. The 49ers, they beat down the Giants 28-10. 4-interception day for Danny Dimes, not a good showing by him. 49ers were by far and away the superior team, and they're able to comfortably win this one. And then my upset, I thought, happened. The Falcons did beat the Eagles. I thought the Eagles would actually beat Atlanta pretty handily, but the Falcons win the Battle of the Birds 31-17, so good for Atlanta. Desmond Ridder, his great season continues as he gets them to the divisional round. Here's a look at the bracket after the first round as we'll jump into round number 2, starting off with the 1-seed Bengals and the 7-seeded Jets. And the Bengals win 28-25. The Jets with a late surge in the fourth quarter, but it just was not enough as the Bengals are able to hold on. And MVP favorite Joe Burrow gets them to the AFC Championship game. They'll be facing the Bills. The Bills get revenge over the Chiefs. Allen gets some revenge over Pat Mahomes 27-17 as Buffalo heads to the AFC Championship. They're now 1 win away from getting back to the Super Bowl for the first time in quite a little bit. The Vikings, they end the Falcons' run 31-14. Kirk Cousins, 3 touchdown passes, and the number 1 seed in the NFC clinches their spot in the NFC Championship game as well. As far as who they'll be playing, it was my match of the weekend, and the 49ers win 24-21. They beat Dallas. I had a feeling the 49ers would beat the Cowboys. How about them Cowboys choking again in the postseason? So now we know the matchups that are going to happen in the championship games. Both 1 seeds and 3 seeds. The Bengals and the Bills, the Vikings and the 49ers. Who will be going to the Super Bowl? Well, the Bills clinched their ticket first, 30-12. They beat the Bengals pretty comfortably, in my opinion. And for the first time since the 90s, the Bills are back in the Super Bowl. And who will they be facing? The San Francisco 49ers, who dominate the Minnesota Vikings in Minnesota, mind you, doubling up their score 42-21. Brock Purdy with 5 touchdown passes. And it's going to be the Buffalo Bills and the San Francisco 49ers, both 3 seeds making it. And we will watch this game this weekend on Saturday. I will live stream it, and we'll just watch who wins the Super Bowl. Will it be the Bills who make it to the Super Bowl the first time since the 90s, where they went to 4 straight and were unable to win any of them? They have a chance to finally rewrite that curse, but it won't be easy. In my opinion, they're going to be against the favorites, the San Francisco 49ers, who have been very dominant during this postseason run. They are looking for Super Bowl number 6, the first one in about 29 years. Can they get it done? But let's end the episode by actually looking at the coaching hires. Who will be the new head coaches going into the 2024 season, including the Washington Commanders? First up, we'll start off with the Patriots. They hire Mike Macdonald to be their new head coach. Macdonald has been the defensive coordinator for the Baltimore Ravens, and the Ravens were the best defense in football this season. And as a man who's a Boston, Massachusetts native, they decided to pounce on Mike Macdonald and name him their new head coach. The Seahawks, they had Pete Carroll retire. They hired in-house Shane Waldron will be the new head coach of the Seattle Seahawks. He was their offensive coordinator a year ago. It just makes sense for Seattle just to keep it in-house, so Shane Waldron will get the shot. The Panthers, they hire Steve Wilks, so they rewrite what they, in my opinion, should have did last year and named Steve Wilks the head coach. It took an extra season, but he is indeed the official head coach of the Carolina Panthers after spending 1 season as the defensive coordinator for the San Francisco 49ers. And Wilks has the best chance of winning a Super Bowl before he becomes the head coach. Mike Tomlin lands with the Cleveland Browns. He is staying in the AFC North, and it's with Cleveland. Talk about a revenge game that's going to happen. I think this is a great hire by Cleveland. I think Mike Tomlin knew he was going to get a ton of head coaching positions. In my opinion, Cleveland does seem like the best fit. They have Deshaun Watson at quarterback. Myles Garrett on the defense. They seem the most complete team who was looking for a head coach. I know he was rumored to be going to the Patriots, but he stays in the AFC North, and he'll do battle against his former team twice a year. Speaking of his former team, the Steelers, they hire Vic Fangio to replace Mike Tomlin. Fangio, we know, had the first stint with the Broncos for 3 seasons. It was not the best tenure, but he did turn around a great defense in Miami this past year, and as a Pennsylvania native, the Steelers decided to make Vic Fangio their next head coach and give him another shot at the helm. Finally, the Washington Commanders. Who do they name as their head coach? It's going to be Eric Bieniemy. He finally gets a job as the head coach. He was our offensive coordinator a season ago. We fired Ron Rivera, and we also fired our defensive coordinator. But Bieniemy did a very good job as the offensive coordinator. Yes, Brissett had his struggles, but I think Eric Bieniemy did a very good job with the offensive play. We were a top 5 offense in the NFL, and I think he deserves his first chance as a head coach. And this is interesting because we know that the Commanders quarterback position is really open going into the offseason. Yes, you have Sam Howell, who does have a year underneath the system as Eric Bieniemy, but there's a lot of ties to quarterbacks in this draft. Bieniemy is a former Colorado Buffalo, and Shedeur Sanders is going to be in this year's draft. Does he decide to pick a quarterback from his alma mater? Or, even bigger, do the Commanders potentially look to move up in the draft because Caleb Williams is going to be the top pick, and a lot of people have compared him to Patrick Mahomes, which we know Bieniemy has a ton of experience with in his time in Kansas City. So that's going to be a very interesting offseason. I hope you guys are ready for it. Before we get there, we are going to look at the Super Bowl this week, and I hope you guys to see you there. But thank you guys so much for watching. This was a long video, and I appreciate you guys sticking around to the end and for just always being supportive of the series. So make sure you drop a like and you subscribe down below, especially if you want more franchise content. This is Mr. Rob, and I'll see you in the next one.